What we've got coming up next is a discussion about roof planning, and there's going to be several components of that. We're going to talk about some remove and replacement decisions versus overlay. Going to talk about just roof planning and how you plan for the future to when you have roofs that need to be replaced, that not in regard to a claim, but just over the course of time when they need to be replaced, and talk about warranties in this next section. So the first thing, though, we're gonna hit on is roof planning, the decision to actually remove and replace in a claim scenario. So we have a new panelist joining me, and I'll let David introduce his at his time. But we've got Kendall Blocker. He is an adjuster with TASB. He's out of Lubbock, so he handles all of our West Texas Panhandle area. And he is, if you're familiar with the theater, he is taking the place of Ken Zartner, who's with Odessa College. And Ken was not able to be here, so Kendall has stepped in Ken's place to talk about the Odessa College claim. So let me give you just a brief background. In June of 2017, kind of the Midland, Odessa area hit with very large hail. I think we saw upwards of 4 inches at various places in and around Midland, Odessa, so a pretty devastating storm. And Odessa College had a large claim as a result, and Kendall worked with Ken to resolve that claim. And it's still ongoing. But let's just kind of start with, so the premise with this portion is, when a claim situation happens, you potentially have 2 options: remove and replace the damaged roofs, or do an overlay. We're going to talk about the decision that Odessa College made to remove and replace. Then David and Zach are going to talk about the decision that the city of Allen made in regards to overlays. So let's talk about Odessa College, and just give us, Kendall, just a little bit of background about kind of just the claim itself and just some general things that were going on.
Well, Odessa College had multiple roof types scattered across the campus there. They had some built-up roofs, some single-ply roofs of various manufacturers on each one, actually. And we ended up having damage on all of the built-up roofs, as it turned out, all of the single-ply roofs as well. They've gone through a lengthy process of getting bids, and we actually got bids for like, kind, and quality for each roof, and then bids for upgrades for each roof as well.
Talk about, so was it ever a concern or a discussion amongst the college, the repair or remove and replace versus overlay? Was that ever a conversation that was had with the college?
They did talk about it briefly, but most of the roofs that were damaged to the point where they were going to have to go down to the deck at any way, so they were pretty much all going to be replaced fully. Okay,
so when you say that they were damaged to the point that they had to go down to the deck, so that means what else aside from what was on top, the membrane?
The membrane.
What else was damaged?
The underlayment. They had lots of moisture up in the layers underneath which each one of them, whether it was the single ply or the built-up roofs, they had moisture underneath those that required them to go down all the way down to the deck and replace all layers.
Okay. Oh, move your microphone
a little closer.
Okay. So they had built-up roofs, which were there gravel on? Were they gravel built up?
They had gravel built up. They had, like I said, single ply. I don't recall them having any modified cap built-up roofs. I think all of their built-up roofs were gravel ballasted.
Okay, so a couple different varieties of types of roofs, both of which were damaged by the hail.
Yes.
So was it the fact that, let's say, the outer layer, the membrane, was compromised and that allowed water in, and then that's what caused the damage underneath?
Underneath, yes.
Okay. So you said there was not then an option to do
They really didn't have the option just to overlay anything, no.
Okay, so then they had to, when they have to do a, let's say, a remove and replace, what all are they taking off? What are the different things that they're taking off?
Well, on the built-up roof, obviously, they have to scrape off all the gravel, then the layers of felt, as they mentioned earlier, that are put down with the asphalt, down to the deck, which in most cases on this is a metal deck. On the single ply, they actually had, they had referred to some of the fan fold insulation, which is an issue underneath these single ply membranes. And so they had to take the insulation again down to the metal deck on these roofs as well. A couple of the single ply roofs had been overlaid previously on top of built-up gravel ballast roofs where the majority of the gravel had been removed, but obviously not every bit of it. But so they did have a couple of these single ply roofs that were overlay roofs to begin with.
Okay, okay. So you mentioned that there was a bid process that happened, and you said they spec'd out for like, kind, and quality, which is what the coverage provides for, but they also spec'd out to do something different. What was driving their decision to consider doing something other than like, kind, and quality?
Well, the college is extremely interested in the longevity of the roofing, and they really wanted to upgrade so they did not have to go through this on a regular basis. And they just did a really good job of investigating. They had a roofing consultant who they talked to on a regular basis. And they went through all the scenarios of all the different types of roofing and decided that they wanted to spec out, the like, kind, and quality, obviously for our purposes. Okay. And then the upgraded roof that they decided to go with, which was a gravel ballasted, and it's a specialty gravel ballasted roof with a 4-inch warranty, that they wanted to look at and see once they got the bids if it was feasible.
And did they decide that it was feasible?
It was feasible. Specifically on the single ply that were overlaid, there was 3 major roofs on that particular portion of it. The difference between the upgraded roof and the like, kind, and quality was a total of $50,000 on roughly $2.5 million worth of roof.
$50,000.
$50,000 on $2.5 million worth of roof.
Okay. Okay. Of course. Oh, do we have a microphone? For the benefit of the streaming folks.
Kendall, was any code requirements factored into their decision-making when they were going through that process?
Oh, absolutely. There was some code requirements that had to be met. The city of Odessa requires that they go back with a certain amount of insulation. I believe in this case it was 2.5 inches on these roofs. That was also figured into the cost of both the like, kind, and quality and the upgraded roof. Does that answer your question? As you may or may not know, we pay 10% of the cost of damaged per building towards codes, and that is considered into this whole process. Like I said, on both sides of this, and the end result was the $50,000 difference.
Okay.
Run, Kim.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it code in most locations where you can't do a third overlay? If there's already an overlay, you can't. That's not an option.
Absolutely.
So it has to come down to the deck
Absolutely.
at that point. Okay.
So was that a part of the factor of their decision?
Well, like I said, they were going to have to go down to the deck anyway,
Okay.
so it really was not.
Okay. Okay. Now, and you mentioned for all of the roofs, they did the gravel ballasted?
No, that is not.
Okay.
They did have a sports center, which is a very large complex over pools and basketball courts and stuff, that they did go back with the single ply roof back on top, but the building was spec'd for that. They were not, it would not hold the load of a gravel ballasted roof.
Okay. And was there a specific reason why they went with gravel ballasted? Because my presumption is that's not a common replacement roof type that we see.
Well, like they said earlier, it is not anymore.
Okay.
But they felt like that the hail warranty that they were going to get with this was going to give them the best results for the long haul, because the consultant had advised them if they maintained it, and there was if they redid the flashing after 15 years, that they could extend that roof from 20 to 30 years, still under warranty.
Okay. Do you know, did the gravel play any part in the warranty piece? You may not know that, but just I'm curious as to whether or not that the same warranty would have applied even if they didn't have gravel, because gravel provides an extra protection against hail.
Well, obviously it does, and it's like they said earlier, it's the system. It's the entire system that is warranted, not just the materials itself. It's the way the whole system is put on, and that includes the gravel ballast on there.
Okay. Okay.
What was the $50,000 difference? What was that comprised of?
Now that I really can't
Okay.
tell you. That was just the winning bid. The winning bid for the like, kind, and quality over the winning bid for the like, kind, and quality was $50,000 difference. I can't really break it out for you because I really don't know.
Okay. So let me ask you one last question, then we'll pass it over to David and Zach. So is it typically a cut and dried question or issue as to whether or not it's a remove and replace or an overlay, or are there other factors where it might be, okay, some people might choose overlay, some people might choose remove and replace, or is it a black and white issue?
Oh, well, in some cases, absolutely, it's black and white, because like in this case, they really didn't have a choice but to go all the way down. If they already had 2 layers on there, you would have to go all the way down. When you only have 1 layer, yeah, there's always choices. You can always, take the gravel off and overlay it with the single ply, which is what they had done on a couple of those to begin with.
Okay. Okay. Good. Well, with that, let's pass it on over to David.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to have Scott come up, because we not only talk to our members about overlays when possible, our own building was overlaid just this summer, where we all reside. So, and when you look at this picture here, what you'll see is we took some pictures, and Scott assisted us with it, and he assisted Zach and Alan. You'll see that's partially redone, and we took these pictures with a drone, and it'll show you in a minute to kind of demonstrate. You heard the mention of the cool roof earlier, so we show some of that. This picture of the building and the scope of the work. But Scott, talk a little bit about overlay first in general, and then I'll even talk a little bit about kind of the cost differential and what we were able to achieve.
Well, in looking at this roof, we had a couple things we wanted to consider. One is what kind of activity is going to be in the building. The second we looked at is what type of substrate did we have based on the current as-builts, based on the live and dead loads of the building, then looking at the insulation assembly on the roof. This particular roof had 2 layers of 2.5-inch ISO on it currently. It then had a overlay board, and then we had a 3-ply built-up roof, typical standard type 4, ASTM type 3 asphalt, with a cap sheet surfacing. And then on top of that, at some point later on, after its initial installation, they had installed a coating. We had several details we also had to look at as it related to integrating some of the glass that goes from the first or the 3rd floor down to the 2nd floor. But looking in that, we had a couple considerations. The first thing we wanted to look at is what was the condition of the existing substrate, the metal deck. In review of the metal deck was in good shape. We felt like we had a very good handle on what its live and dead loads were based on both design and current status. We did identify some locations where we had some blisters, some signs of moisture from prior leaks with repairs. You can actually see some of the spots that there were some additional cap sheet put on in later years to kind of maintain the roof. We also looked at the parapet wall conditions. This particular roof had some EFIS assembly cladding where the base flashings would terminate up to. We wanted to make sure that we converted that from a surface mount, the way it currently was, to a two-piece counter flashing that got up behind that EFIS so that no water could penetrate down behind the base flashings. So after we did that, verified we were in good shape from a thermal standpoint, verified that we had good contingency plans as it related to investigation of moisture as we progressed through the roof. We put together an assembly using 1/4-inch Dens deck along with an 80 mil fleece fully adhered, which got us into a significant arena both from a hail resistance standpoint under FM testing, as well as getting us a much beefier membrane that was going to get us some significant life down the road.
Right. And also in doing this, we looked at the possibility, I wasn't directly involved, but I do know that we looked at the possibility of the complete tear off and go back. And at that point, we roughly, when we went with the overlay, cut that bill in half, a little more than half, and we're still able to achieve, as you said, 80 mil, correct?
Correct. We got the 80 mil, the full assembly done, and we ended up with the same exact warranty, maybe a little bit better than what we would have had they gone the other direction.
Yeah. Now, what is this showing us, Scott?
This is actually some drone footage. What we did is we sent a drone up and did some infrareding of the roof. You can kind of see where part of it is not done, where the other parts are. The darker colors are reading temperature differential, basically. The real bright areas, those are the existing built-up areas. All the dark areas, those are the cooler areas where the existing built-up and coating was. And what it's showing is just the dramatic contrast in rooftop ambient air temperature between what was now being installed, the fully adhered 80 mil, which was a cool roof, certified roof assembly with high emissivity, high reflectivity, versus the existing built-up and coating assembly there on the right on the upper two.
Yeah, and when we show this, this isn't a function of just overlay, this function of the top of roof. I know we'd mentioned earlier, Elaine had referenced the reason these products and Jim are so popular is not only are they easy to put on, but they also have a lot of cool roof. And I'm no engineer, but I have to think that helps heating and cooling, or helps cooling.
It's all about return on investment. If we're going to invest $1, how do we get the maximum amount, 99.9 cents out of that dollar, to work for the benefit of the owner, both now, long term? Because in many cases, if we can dramatically affect the energy efficiency, if we've got air intakes pulling air that's 180 degrees ambient roof temperature, trying to cool it to 70 and drop that 50, 60 degrees, that's an energy saving, that's a load savings. That likely means we're going to extend the HVAC mechanical life. It likely means we're going to dramatically reduce the energy use by as much as 12, 13% in Texas. That all goes to, when you've got a shrewd owner, he's looking at those saying, okay, this becomes some of my capital funding 2 decades down the road, 3 decades down the road when I have to go replace again. I'm in a financial position, if I use these savings smart, to be able to facilitate that very easily.
All right, now I want to introduce to you Mr. Zach Kane. He's with the City of Allen. We did an overlay. They made that decision. As you can see, this is the Allen Event Center. And the Allen Event Center is obviously, Zach, you can talk a little bit about its use and why it's such an important project or high-profile building in Allen.
Sure. So this is the Allen Event Center. City of Allen, we're in North Texas, and at the Event Center, we have all types of activities that go on here, and it's not only used by the citizens of Allen, it's used by citizens across North Texas. We have sporting events, hockey, soccer, professional teams play there. We also use it for high school graduations. It can be rented out for trade shows, job fairs, bull riding, monster truck rallies, you name it, we're doing it. So it's a lot of people have pride in this building in Allen because a lot of other cities, they don't have something like this. So on March 24th, what happened was we got hit by our worst hailstorm the city's ever seen in the history of Allen. It was the largest claim we've ever filed. The roof had over 50,000 hits by baseball and softball size hail. It just pretty much drove down our main road, and you would have thought it just stayed right on track with the road, just right on down, dead end, Allen Event Center. So of course, me as the risk manager, my morning, I woke up from a customer perspective to a bunch of directors in my office when I got there, and I thought I was late, but I wasn't. They just were there before I was. But it was hectic because the Allen Event Center, like I said, we take a lot of pride in this building, and we do a lot for our community there and surrounding communities. We have contracts to think about. We have graduations to think about. It's March 24th. We have upcoming sporting events. So it's very hectic. So from a customer standpoint, I'm not a roof expert. I'm learning a lot from Scott. But from our standpoint is, what do we do first? Where do we start? Knowing your coverages is very important from a customer standpoint. What you should do, what you need to do. We need to protect the inside of our building. We know it's damaged. We know that's our duty. So our first thought is triage. Triage repairs first. We talk getting all departments involved right from the start. That's very important. Planning, code, finance, purchasing, engineering, risk, council, city management. Everyone needs to be on the same page from the start. And I'm very lucky that the city, we all work together very well, and we work closely together, and it went on without a hitch. Other important thing from a customer standpoint, know your adjuster. That's huge. Have a relationship. I knew when I called, we were good. So I called, filed the claim, triage was there within a week. Probably sooner than that, to be honest with you. Everyone up on top of that roof starting to cover the holes up. And that gave us time to move on to our next phase as a customer. Okay, now what do we do? Triage is in the works. What's the next step? We got to figure out what went wrong, what we have on the roof, how old is it, what is our options moving forward. And for us, overlay was the best option. We couldn't, if it was an option, that was what we were going to do. Couldn't take apart the roof with, and leave it open to the elements. For some reason, March and April, it rained every Saturday in Allen. Every time there was an event, no hesitation, 90% chance of rain. We could not open up the roof. We had millions of dollars worth of equipment inside for gaming. It's just becoming a big thing now. It was a big event. We had millions of dollars equipment inside for that. We had millions of dollars equipment inside for our scoreboards for our hockey team. So we chose the overlay.
Well, and I think one of the things for y'all was, obviously, Scott, I think it was 40 mil or less that was on there. And before y'all throw rocks at Zach, because we've talked about 40 mil, they inherited that roof when they acquired it. Zach did not approve putting on 40 mil. But what was needed, or what their coverage allowed, and they wanted to be budget neutral, was we owed to replace what they had on there. And overlay, part of the reason, and you can talk to this, is what did it allow you to do with your roof?
It allowed us to upgrade it significantly. Our goal at the city was we wanted to make sure we didn't have another hail claim for a very long time on this building. based on the contracts and how much business this building generates and how many people use it. Closing or removing the roof or having another hailstorm of this magnitude, we wanted to upgrade it, pretty much make it bulletproof to hail. That was our main goal. Everybody in the city, all the departments, we came to an agreement, and it allowed us to do that. We were able, since we decided to do the overlay, we were able to quadruple the thickness from I think it was actually 30, not 40.
Yeah, I'm trying to be nice.
It was like 36. 36 mil, but now we're going up to 80. And we were allowed to do that, but the best part is the city, we have a $1,000 deductible, and that's all we're paying. So that's it. We paid $1,000. The citizens paid $1,000. It's taxpayer money, and the rest of it's covered.
Just for clarification too, I want to be clear because we've got a lot of different decks that Zach and the city have on this building. And you can see me holding actually a piece of the membrane there on the left, but it was roughly about a 36 mil membrane. On the lower decks, which would be the shipping and the practice, there's a practice hockey rink. That particular building, while it currently had roughly, I think we were at 28.2 Rs in the existing assembly. What we're doing, or what they contracted to do, was they're coming in and removing the existing 36 mil membrane. They're then attaching a quarter inch Densdeck Prime gypsum board, fully adhering, a 60 mil fleece back, so we're talking roughly 78 mil thick membrane, fully adhered where it was mechanically attached before. Then over the existing practice hockey rink, we also had them incorporate white fasteners. So when we pierced that deck with attachment of the new Densdeck, we weren't going to run into any issues with painting or discoloration from the fasteners coming through the underside of the deck. Then on the upper arena, because we've got some significant issues as it relates to what a large cavity of opening there is there, what we're doing is we're coming in mechanically attaching quarter inch Invinciboard and then fully adhering an 80 mil fleece back, roughly 106 mils thick total. We're able to do that because, as is with your thermal codes, the same is true with your structural codes. You have both a prescriptive guideline and you have a trade-off guideline. In the world of roofing and structural capacity, as long as I do not exceed the existing live and dead load capacity by plus or minus 5%, we can do about anything we need to do up there. We also had some particular issues because you'll notice on the arena roof, we've got some aggressive slopes. Both ends are sloped up to about a 5-on-12, which are challenging to say the least. We had to come up with some pretty particular assemblies that were going to fall within the window of factory mutual for uplift, but also fall within the UL Class A assembly ratings as it related to those. So I just wanted to clarify why technically, yes, you could call both an overlay. There's a big chunk of those in the practice hockey rink in the shipping area where we're actually pulling the membrane off as they go across the roof, replacing any wet or damaged insulation, and then the new assembly is going on top. But everything is getting fully adhered. The other thing we did in concert to tie back to the drone footage we took with the infrared, all of those large units that you see that feed that arena and the practice rink, those are all having 60 mil, 86 mil nominal fleece back fully adhered to all of those exposed ducts that are feeding that chilled air into those arena areas. We did that because now that's a significant upgrade as that unit cools that air and shoots those air through those 5 or 6 massive ducts. I mean, you could literally walk through them. We've now put that cool roof certified membrane and encased those to prevent any future maintenance, but also to get the benefits of that emissivity, reflectivity off of those ducts, so that the air, if the air is 50 degrees out of those units going through those ducts, we want it to stay as close to 50 as we can, hopefully 52, 53 degrees. But another huge efficiency that we were able to add by just trying to tap into everything we could and maximizing each dollar.
All right. Thank you. I know we're about out of time, and I know time was a big consideration here as well. What is Scott's deadline for getting that arena roof done? And why is he sitting here?
That's an excellent question. I don't know why he's sitting here. No, it's going to be done in 90 days, 90 calendar days.
We've got a target we've got a target right now. Everybody's in agreement. We'll have that arena done. It'll start over the next 5 days. We've got a number of safety issues we obviously have to deal with because we have no parapets on that. But the arena roof itself is going to be done prior to the minor hockey league season starting. Looks like about 3 days, which would be October 7th, 8th, or 9th, is the projected finish date for that upper arena part. The other parts will then follow after that, but we needed to get that upper arena done so that we knew we were 100% watertight, both for the executive suites that surround it, as well as all the people and participants there in the arena.
All right. Thank both of y'all. Well, I know we're about time, but any questions from the audience for either of the guys up here before we let them go and bring up some more folks? All right. Looks like y'all passed.
All right.
Thanks
Good
to
job.
both of you. Thank you, Zach. I think you get to come back one more time.
Scott, you get to stay. You get to stay.
Okay.
You get to stay. Scott gets to stay, so Helene and Grady are going to come back up.
Actually, Zach does too. I tried to release him, but he actually has some more as well.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about roof replacements. And we're going to start with Grady. And when we talk about roof replacements, it's actually kind of roof purchasing replacement. So planning for the future, not in regards to a claim, but in regards to, hey, we've got some old roofs and it's probably a good idea that they be replaced at some point in time. So what does that look like? So Grady, maybe let me start with what I hope is a simple question. Should building owners have roof replacement plans?
Yes. Thank you for that question. Next.
Okay. What in your experience have you seen those plans look like? Because it's easy to say, yeah, you should have a plan, but okay, what if people don't know what that looks like?
Unfortunately, most folks' plan is just response to an emergency. In part of what we do in our division is helping districts with assessing their facilities and then coming up with a long-range plan to strategically replace certain systems, roofs being one of the key ones, as well as HVAC systems. Those are also tied together because so many HVAC units are on roofs. So understanding what the life cycles are, planning for the desired replacement, and then working with folks on the finance side to see if you can put together a financially viable plan to actually replace those. The plans that I've seen range from we'll fix it if it fails to a nice list on a piece of paper to maybe a spreadsheet with some dates and some values and some areas to even some very sophisticated plans created by a roofing consultant, hosted on the cloud, that breaks down not just the capital replacement, but also maintenance efforts that need to be done periodically to keep roofs in great shape.
Okay, maybe peel back a couple of those layers, starting with the life cycle. So how often do you run into folks that have no idea how old their roofs are?
Daily.
Okay, and so what what do you advise folks to do when they have no idea how old their roofs are?
You've got to do some digging, get into the documentation, and create a facility and inventory that includes the age of the roof for that section, as well as some of the other high-cost, high-impact systems.
Is there an easy way to tell? Let's say they don't have paperwork. So is there an easy way to tell by looking at the roof how old it maybe be?
I'm going to ask some of these other folks. I haven't seen anything yet. I've been fooled too many times to try and say, sure, you can walk out there and tell that single ply is only 6 years old, and when it may be 8 or 10.
I was going to say, sometimes you're fortunate. Some of the projects are actually stamped. You can actually find run numbers on the laps. A lot of the major manufacturers across the country will typically put those on there, not only for your use, but for their use, should they have a warranty. It gives them some clear definition as to not only what the product was when it was made, but even what plant shipped that product, so that they can actually identify where it and what the channel it went as it got to this particular project. So there are ways, as well as your documents. You've got historical documents on leaks, invoices that you've paid over time, invoices that you may have paid for expansions or replacements in the past, and then you have your warranty documents. And in some cases, we've worked with members where they say, hey, I don't know what this product is. I know the category or the family, it's a single ply, but I don't know whose. We were able to identify a number of the manufacturers will also emboss their name on some of the flashings. You find that, it's a simple call to the manufacturer's quality control warranty office. You give them the address, and they can pretty much tell you exactly the date of substantial completion, date of warranty issue, as well as possibly some of the history on that roof that may have occurred over time, which leads to you.
Not just the history, they can tell you the system. So they can actually, one of the questions that we were talking about over lunch is, how do I tell what's underneath the membrane? From the deck up, they can say it's this, this, and this. They should be able to. And Scott's 100% right. We can tell by address. Now, where you have multiple buildings at the same address, we may say, well, it's this building, the building that's, 50 by 180, as opposed to, the little hut that's over here. So we'll give you, physical dimensions, and then that at least. And the other thing is if you don't know the manufacturer, but you know that historically you've worked with, say, and let's use thermoplastics or use TPO. There's primarily 4 manufacturers of TPO. Call all of them. And if you give them an address, they should be able to tell you whether or not there at least is a guarantee. And then you can go from there. The same thing with modifieds, with built-up. It's a limited universe of the manufacturers that you should be able to reach out and contact them and be able to get assistance.
Okay. So, Scott, you mentioned potentially looking for markings. To me, that never having been on a commercial roof, a big one, that sounds like looking for a needle in a haystack. So how easy is it to find those?
It's really not bad. If you walk over to a lot of penetrations, let's say in the PVC TPO category, a lot of the manufacturers are going to emboss GAF right there on it. Or if you look along a weld line or a lap line, usually around the perimeter at a wall, you'll actually see some numbers made out of dots that are printed on there, which will give you some key indicators that when you called one or all 4 of them, you give them those numbers. One of them, the light's going to go off. They're going to go, yeah, that's probably ours. And there's also some colors. Even on the built-up side, I know JM for years would run a blue line on their lap line for their cap sheet. So they're also, just be observant and pick up if there's a certain color at a lap line, if there's an ID number, if there's a name embossed. All of those things can be indicators.
Okay. So Grady, back to you. So talking about if we've got folks that don't currently have some kind of a roof replacement plan in place, how would you advise that they start? What would they do first? What should they do next? What other folks should be involved in that conversation? Just, can you kind of map that out for them of kind of how they do that?
Sure. I think they just talked about the first step, identifying what you have without having that good understanding, and building your inventory and working to make sure it's accurate. And then bringing out your roof consultant, or if you've got a roofing contractor that you've worked with before, to do an assessment on the roofs to then gauge the condition of those to see if they're in line with the life expectancy. Maybe it's accelerated, maybe they're in better shape than expected, to come up with an anticipated replacement date. You've got the schedule. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer through that assessment. And then through your maintenance inspections and regular inspections, being able to adjust that as needed going forward. So updating that inventory on a regular basis.
Okay. What other folks need to be involved in this process?
I think certainly if you have a relationship with a roof designer or consultant, if not, seek someone out and get them involved to give that expert advice, as well as contractors that you may have used or those that offer those services as far as assessment of your roof system.
I would also point out, a lot of people forget, but the manufacturers can be a fabulous resource. And you're going to find that most of the big 4 or 5 manufacturers, they have reps covering the entire country, and they can be extremely helpful. In many cases, they don't charge, and they're wanting to help and can do so without really any financial motivation. They're very good at helping, and they understand their products, and they understand how to recognize them and what to do with them, and what you can do with or without them.
Right, and not just the information about what the roof is, but also providing some extended or additional training for your staff. They're a fantastic resource, so always plugging into the manufacturers is a big help.
So Scott said something I wanted to address, though, a little bit of caution. But Grady just said something that's even, everything's on the internet now. And we all have websites, and we have training videos, and we have blogs and stuff. I don't even know what it's called, okay? So there is a tremendous amount of information that's available that, and I look at, and manufacturers have invested a lot in training facilities. So if you reach out, you should get that. Now, in that, a lot of that, we don't have a financial interest other than trying to do roofing right in that type of support. One thing Scott said, though, that I'm going to interject a word of caution. I call it separation of church and state, and I don't know that that's PC, but be careful of anyone who should be at the table who's offering to blur lines. And what I mean by that is sure, you can ask me my professional opinion as an engineer about how a TPO membrane should perform, or you should ask me this. But I work for a manufacturer, and I am not the designer of record, and that's not my job. You need to hire a consultant, or you need to have a designer of record. And those who say, oh, the manufacturer did it all for me, you might be a little hesitant because they do have, their interest may be overriding yours. And that's, Scott?
The manufacturer is a resource to do within their bounds to do. But we try to tap as many resources as we can, but remembering what their specific role is in that process is key.
Okay.
Sometimes it's even key to know how they are associated with the manufacturer, whether they're a true representative, an agent, what division or sales or marketing. So just be cognizant of that stuff.
Okay. Grady, how daunting of a task is it to create one of these plans? It sounds like it's a lot of work. And is it a lot of work? Is it expensive to just create the plan? How much time does it take to develop it?
kind of depends on the scale. You know, a school district that has 3 buildings and all the documentation together, because they're fairly new facilities or new roofs, it wouldn't take quite as long. A larger district with multiple facilities and then missing documentation, obviously the effort's going to be a greater effort. It is something that you could take on internally. I'm a big fan of having that outside party come in, finding the designer, involving the manufacturer to assist in the assessment so that you can get a good outside look. As the operator of the building that has to send out a maintenance worker every time it rains because we just can't figure out where that roof is leaking and how to solve that issue, that roof may be terrible when it's, you know, it's one hole somewhere that you just can't find. So getting that third person perspective is good as well.
Okay. And then let me ask Scott and Helene real quick before we transition into warranties about, you guys have either worked with or for some of, you know, big box retailers that have lots of roofs. Is there anything that you can take from the experience of working with those folks that would be transferable to, you know, public entities that might not have the same types of resources that those retailers have in the space of trying to have a roof replacement plan?
I'll just kick off this end from the owner side because I've seen it even with some of the very largest that both you've dealt with and I have. It's amazing how complex it gets to get to that point where a roof is warranted, and it doesn't take 3 days before someone even as big as that remembers they even had one. If you're going to invest whatever dollars you're going to invest to have a warranty, to have that manufacturer as a partner for some period of time, because it's not a guarantee against leaks. It's not. It's just, it's a document that says, hey, we're going to work together and make sure that this thing gets off on the right foot, make sure it gets installed right. We look at it, but it doesn't guarantee that there won't be a problem down the road. But make sure you keep records. It's amazing how many people we run into where they have called time and time again to have repairs or leaks fixed and have never once notified the manufacturer. Well, you can't expect the manufacturer to come in 10 years after the fact when all these issues have now brewed up, probably related to 1 or 2 things that have now magnified, and expect them to jump in the boat with you at that point. It's already sinking. You know, keep records and keep that communication going. If you have a problem, get them involved. Let's solve the issue while it's an issue and not a major disaster. But I would also tell you, warranties are not the solve-all. Your number one investment is making sure you invest in the right system for that building use with the best type of assembly that is going to generate all the parts and pieces that you need to run that building with the least amount of maintenance for whatever period of time you want to depreciate that investment. Then you want that investment to return back to you. Those are key.
No, okay, so Scott said something and then it dawned on me. So we keep talking about best practice, and if I were some of you, I'd be like, wow, this is so far beyond me. I'm starting way back. And so let me just share with you that even some of the largest corporations that have tremendous resources that they've invested towards roofing, they still don't know what's on their roofs. They don't know that they have warranties. They don't. And there's a major auto manufacturer that whenever a new engineer gets assigned to their plant, you can guess. The first thing they're put in charge of is like the roofs. And I know this because a woman that I went to school with was an engineer, and she got assigned to a plant. It happened to be in St. Louis, and she called me because you work for a roofing, what do I do? And I said, well, do you have any warranties in place? What's that? And it was like, oh, okay, so Stephanie, this is what. But so don't feel that you're behind the 8 ball. So that's the first thing. The other thing about some of these large major property owners is they do take, though, a pragmatic approach to roofing. They either look at it as a short-term investment. A very large retailer, very, very large retailer, used to take the approach that the roof, they just wanted to get it to 7, 8, or 9 years, the new construction part. And then they just turn it over to the existing facility people, and then it was their problem. But it was their formula for getting a store up and open and generating revenue. So they took a very short-term approach to the roof on the front end. 6, 7, 8, 10 years into it, then they took a longer approach. Now the humor to that was that the rest of the building, they also took kind of a short-term approach. So they did things like they left out expansion joints. Okay, so, but those are the types of, they even will shift their philosophy mid-stride. Most importantly, though, the one thing that a takeaway is the importance of knowing what's there and historical records. And even if you just do that, if your takeaway from today is to know what's up there and to have a historical record, you will be way far ahead of even some of the largest property owners in the United States.
And tap good resources and double check them. You know, that's the beauty of the internet. You can get data and you can get on there and you can fact check it for yourself just to be sure, because it's all pretty readily available.
Okay. So let's talk about some basics then with warranties, because, right, if you have a roof replacement, either from a claim or you're doing it on an existing building or even new construction, you're going to get some kind of a warranty without even asking for it. Yes, Helene?
Okay, so let's all get on the same page. There's warranties and guarantees. Generally, people talk about guarantees, but what they're talking about is, regardless, it is a form of a limited warranty. Now, I'm going to break them into two big buckets. Here's a bucket and there's a bucket. Product warranties is one bucket. System warranties are another bucket. So generally, on the low slope roofing side, people talk about NDLs and they talk about roofing system guarantees. They're talking about this system bucket over here. So now I'm going to make it a little bit tricky. There are some product warranties that people think are system warranties, okay? Or they talk about a labor and material guarantee. So what are some of the games that get played? A labor and material guarantee that only covers a product defect is a product warranty. The labor and material says that the manufacturer is going to provide the labor and the material in the event of a product defect. Did y'all see what I just said?
Provided he manufactures those products.
Yeah. But now we get into the system guarantee. The kind of the gold level, the gold standard is a roofing system warranty that covers defects in both the materials provided and the labor, the workmanship for the roofing system. That's really that's the gold standard. Now, there's other types, and it has no dollar limit. You're going, well, what's that? Everything's got some limit. But the no dollar limit means that the manufacturer, whoever is the issuer of this roofing system material and labor guarantee covering workmanship and product defects, there isn't a dollar limit on how much they will spend to repair a leak caused by either of those. Okay?
Because there are some.
And so I'm going to get into
penal
that. That's the NDL part. When it's not a no dollar limit, there's a limitation. There may be a dollar amount stated on the front of the guarantee, like $100 or $1 per square foot. There may be a limitation that they'll spend up to the original installed cost. Some of us would say original installed cost, OIC. Okay? Some of them call it a penal sum system guarantee. But there's this bucket product, this bucket system, but understand even the system guarantees may be limited in what they cover. Is everybody completely confused now? What the point of all of this is, there are these big buckets. If you don't read the guarantee, then you are at the mercy of whoever's trying to sell it to you. So read what your guarantee covers, read what is required of you, we can get into that in a minute, read what it covers and what doesn't. One of the things that people asked about is what, and we talked about earlier, is what cancels a guarantee. I would argue that very little should be cause for cancellation. Okay, some manufacturers will hide behind causes of cancellation. But also think about what's fair. And I loved it. It came up 3 or 4 minutes ago. What's not fair is to have a problem 8 or 9 or 10 years and then finally figure out that you have a system guarantee and expect that the fact that you've destroyed 30% of the roof, that's the manufacturer's problem when you didn't tell them for 8 or 9 or 10 years. So there is usually a clause for notice. And one thing that's important is, while our friend Jim from this morning may be an honorable contractor, notice to the contractor is generally not notice to the manufacturer. So it's going to tell you there who you need to call.
Is there a typical time? What's the typical
And there's
time
a
for
time,
notice?
like 30 or 60 days.
It's always written in
It's on. So it
that
goes back
guarantee
to
document.
knowing what's on, what the guarantee says is really important. And then looking at the causes, there's 2 things. People talk about canceling a guarantee. There should be pretty limited things that actually cancel it. But what you should understand is there may be stuff that are excluded from coverage. Those are exclusions, and they're stated. That doesn't mean they cancel the guarantee. It doesn't mean that if you have ponding water, your guarantee is canceled. What it does mean, though, is that if you have ponding water and it's asphaltic system and that guarantee excludes problems caused by ponding water, that area that ponds water may not be covered.
So that's a pretty common exclusion. So ponding water bad.
With asphaltic systems. On single ply, not so much. Usually it isn't excluded.
Some of the TPOs for ponding, some not
Some
all.
not, yep.
I mean, it's also difficult if you're not staying up with and reading the warranty and understanding what the system is. Where does that manufacturer's warranty stop and end? Did they supply the metal termination? Did they not? They don't warrant the HVAC equipment. They don't warrant the condensation lines. There are things, I used to look at it as, if they didn't make it, is it really fair to assume that they should be responsible for it if that was the defect that caused the problem? If the answer is no, then that kind of tells you logically, probably not. But if they made it, they sold it as part of the system, then they probably are.
It's probably covered.
Okay, let me just jump to Zach for a second, because I believe that you guys had a decision to make regarding warranties with your project.
Yeah, we did. And I would just like to say I'm pretty proud of us, because I'm going listening to you 3, and I'm like, okay, maintenance check, we got that covered. Warranty, knowledge check, we got that covered. So we're doing the right things over in Allen, apparently. So I'm pretty happy. Yeah, warranty-wise, we did have a decision to make. The biggest thing for risk professionals or people in purchasing is what Scott and Helene were talking about, which are knowing what is covered and what is excluded, both in your warranties and in your policies. And we even went a step further and looked at our contracts, that we make the manufacturer or the contractor sign for us before they do work for us. We know we do our best to make sure that we pass the risk on to who's doing the work. Or if something happens, we know we're going to be covered somewhere down the line. So we did get a warranty for up to the 15 years, but what they tried to do was they tried to get an extended warranty. Well, wait. You can have a 15-year one, but we'll give you a 20-year for this amount of money. Or we'll give you consequential damage if you put a little more money into it. After reviewing our policies, our contracts, and all the language, we decided, no, we're not going to put any more money into warranties. It should last 15 years. It should do everything that our consultant and the manufacturer said it would do. And if it doesn't, within 15 years, you'll hear from us. But what we're going to do is we're going to use our money and we're going to upgrade it. And we're still taking the money, we're just putting it into upgrading that roof more, making sure it's better off, it's not going to get damaged, we're not going to have any other hailstorms that I'll file a claim in 2 years, and here we are sitting again, and City of Allen's back on here talking about our next roof claim. So, no, but that was our decision that we all came together and made as a city as let's not put the money into the extended warranty. Let's get the best product we possibly can for the event center.
Okay. So you did something that is a lot of people are strong proponents of, because what Zach did was took the money out of paying for an extended or enhanced warranty and put it into the system. But he also got a guarantee, a roofing system warranty, which meant he had an inspection from the manufacturer, probably a 2-year inspection from the manufacturer, and whether it's a 15-year or 25-year roofing system warranty, 20 years, or they're not going to do any more than a final. They may have done an intro, but a final and a 2-year. So he got the benefit of these manufacturers' eyes on it, and then he took the rest of that and actually put it into system selection, which is a smart way that a lot of property owners approach warranty versus putting money into the system.
So hail's typically covered under a general warranty, right?
Did he say that with a smirk? No. No. Let's talk about this. There's usually this exclusion that, extreme weather events, and it'll say tornadoes and blah, blah, blah. And oftentimes it'll say hail. Okay. So there are these things that people call hail warranties, okay? Or they'll call them impact warranties. Or they'll have the warranty that'll have a fill in the blank. It covers hail up to, and then you fill in the blank. Those, though, are often very specific dollar limiting warranties. They really are more impact or puncture resistant warranties that will cover the cost of a roofing contractor coming out and making a repair from the HVAC guy who took his screwdriver and used the roof to hold it at a nice angle for when he needed to use it again, okay? So that really is but when you think of a hail or an impact warranty that covers impact up to, they oftentimes are limited to really about the cost to cover a contractor to come out and make minimal emergency repairs. They may not, and they oftentimes will have a per year, limited to this much per year. So don't think that you have this no dollar limit. It doesn't matter if the roof was destroyed by a severe hailstorm, that's the type of coverage that goes back to reading the warranty and seeing what the coverage is.
And I would encourage everyone also, there's a little section that's called depreciation. The number of years that this warranty will be depreciated out from substantial conclusion, not necessarily a warranty issue date, but substantial conclusion of the roof. Those are particular. One is the warranties begin at substantial completion, not 6 months later if that's when somebody remembered to call them out to get the inspection. It's going to start when it was finished. But the other thing is to make sure you understand how that warranty is going to be depreciated out over whatever that term is. We have some manufacturers, and I'll just throw an example out on the residential side, that'll come in and depreciate 80% of a warranty. I'm going to switch words a little bit, but a warranty on a weather shedding system, they're going to depreciate it 80% in the first 5 years. So I think owners in general think that there's a standardization of language of warranty. Could we all agree or you would agree that's not true at all? It's not even true on how each one manages their program from the time of inspecting it, auditing it, if they're doing that. to how they process it. There's a multitude of ways, and that's where the research comes in of really getting to know who you're dealing with and what manufacturers you want to. I would tell you the larger manufacturers are much closer to the norm, and the lower you go down on the pole, the more regional you get, the more variety you get.
Okay, okay. That's a good place to kind of end, because we've got just a couple minutes left. Is, you know, warranties, obviously it's a complicated topic. Anyone have
I
any
do,
questions?
since I have the microphone.
Okay.
And you may have covered this and I missed it. I'm curious because, Zach, you said that you guys put an 80 mil on, or that's what you're doing. You're putting an 80 mil, but it only has a 15-year warranty. Well, 40 mil has a 15-year warranty. Why would such a better roof system have the same warranty? That's essentially my questions.
So you're inferring that the warranty is system specific, and you can get a 10-year warranty for 80 mil product because you just don't want to pay for the 25 or 30-year warranty. You know, if it's a TPO with high heat formulation, that you can actually, if you fully adhere, go up to 35 years. So, but you may not want to pay because the longer the warranty, the greater the what we call guarantee fee. So the greater the fee. So why not just pay for a 10 or 15 year, and then you get the final inspection, you get the 2-year inspection, and then you've got this great system that they were willing to issue the guarantee for. So now, in terms of product, remember this bucket here, product guarantee, that's where thickness comes into play. The thicker membranes will usually associate with every roll that goes out the door has got a longer term product warranty.
In their particular case, they could have gone up to a 30 on eligibility
That's what I was
wise,
curious about.
or all the way down to, in this particular case, the lowest was 15. They picked the middle because, and this is not different with a lot of them, once you get past the 20-year, okay, manufacturers extending more risk on their part. So you also will start to see in the language that coverages start to tail off past 20. In this particular case, he got the biggest bang for his buck right there at the 20 without sacrificing some things if you were to go push it to 25, 30. It's not all the way consistent with every one of them, but in this particular case, it started to tail after 20. So 20 was the biggest bang for the buck.
Okay.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, good. So with that, we're going to take a break because I know Helene needs to head off to Minneapolis, I believe. So we're going to take a break now, and thank you, Helene, for spending your morning and part of the afternoon with us. Really appreciate it. So about 10 minutes.
All right, we are ready to go. So you guys now know everything you need to know about roofs, and you need to procure one. So the state of Texas has rules on how you procure. So let's talk about some of that with these guys, and they can give us kind of an overview. I think in all of these we all kind of know the big three, if you will, kind of the RFP, request for proposals. We can use purchasing cooperatives and then job order contracting. And we'll talk about each of those briefly, kind of talk about the good, the bad, the ugly for each of them, because none of them are necessarily perfect. Some matter based on the job, some matter based on how you want to do business. And so let's talk about requests for proposals. Which one of you guys wants to talk about requests for proposals with me? Any of them?
I think I am.
All right.
Look at me. Okay. There's really 3 different delivery methods within this type of procurement. Low bid, that's what we all grew up with. You just put out your specifications, low bidder gets it, end of story, hope he's a good contractor. Competitive steel proposal has come on, been made available to school districts in fairly recent years. It allows you as an owner, as a school district, to also put in some other things like past performance and financial capacity and expertise and performance on like jobs and such. So while price is still very important, it's not the only consideration. So that the owner has a little more control over the contractors that they're using. And then also there is design build. And design build is still a proposal process based on qualifications, and you're selecting someone that provides both the design and the construction for that project. With that, school districts are required to hire a third-party designer to review the design, just so that there is a fair set of checks and balances, so that the owner of the entity is getting what they need for that. So the request for proposal is out there. They can be qualified, where you're having proposers or potential proposers meet some qualifications before they propose. They can just be open and public requests for that. The control over the successful contractor is greater for competitive steel proposal than it is for low bid, and I would think even more control for a design build firm, because you're selecting them in advance, and they have a lot of control over the project there. So there are certain communication requirements that you have to meet. We're always a big fan and proponent of owners making sure they include their legal counsel to make sure you're meeting all of the checks and balances in the boxes, and meeting all the requirements for your advertising, requirements for your insurance and things of that nature as you move through a construction project.
Yeah. As we look at a slide, I know it has on there provides opportunity for local contractors, and I know that can cut both ways, because is there any guarantee that a local contractor's going to get it if it does go out to RFP?
No.
No, there's not. And I will tell you, sometimes when I talk to members about it, they'll say, I don't want any of my local contractors to get it, right? Or I think sometimes the problem is, whether you have the qualifications or not, sometimes you don't get the one you want.
Right.
Sometimes does it also, we talk about less control over the winning contractor. If they came in there and got it, and it's almost a one-off for them, such that they're from a long ways away and they don't really plan on doing business again, what sort of problems can that sometimes lead to?
Certainly you get into the warranty issues immediately after the conclusion of the project, but even if you're involved in construction, the hardest thing on any project is finishing it and getting it to that completion stage. As you get towards the end, making sure that the job is properly staffed to complete it on schedule and to meet all those requirements. So a remote contractor certainly poses some issues related to that, responsiveness to warranty recalls and concerns with that as well.
I mean, one of the things that I would add that we've seen historically over the years is it seems like the RFP process ends up being the one that generates the most change order requests of any method we have. And it seems like when you get into that low bidder mentality, it tends to create a situation where you've got contractors that are all trying to skinny it down as tight as they can to get the job. And then once they get the job, the whole thing flips to almost, okay, how do I inch this thing back to where I really would have charged if I wasn't in a low bid situation, kind of deal. And so we have historically seen the RFP process generate from start to finish way more attempts for change orders whenever possible.
And that's where making sure that you've got a designer on board that you can trust, that has written a very tight specification package and design package, helps in defending against those change order attempts.
Well, you're right. Making sure that we have a good, solid, long list of unit prices for anything that might come into play that's unforeseeable.
Right.
And making sure that you close as many windows and holes in the language of that thing so it is very tunnel specific, start to finish in execution.
All right, well, let's move on a little bit because I think we're going to talk a little bit about bid specs a little later on because we want to talk about that a little later about from not only the member or whoever's getting it bid out, but from the contractor side because that makes a difference. But let's talk about kind of using a purchasing cooperative. Scott, I know you use those from time to time. Kind of what are your thoughts on those?
You know, each one of these has its own benefits and risks. The first and foremost thing is each one of you, based on your environments, have to look at your particular procurement policies to see which ones you're even allowed to pursue or explore. There are some benefits to the cooperative. There are some negatives. If anybody ever tells you that the cooperative process procurement through a buy board or TIPS or GSA is free of danger, they're lying, okay? There's just as many bad apples in a TIPS as there is a buy board or one of the others. So what you really have to do is get to a better intimate understanding. If you're going to pursue a TIPS, you need to understand what vendors are in that program that truly can offer you better value for what you're giving up and pursuing one of the other processes. I know in our world, we have seen some benefit in the fact that it dramatically reduces change orders because if you're seeing some similar entities through that procurement, they tend to have a better grasp and understanding of what the scope is, what's expected, what their role is. It also allows you to build some consistencies in the process. So you're not having to retrain a contractor every time. Because unfortunately, as much as we wish, when we hand over a 1.5-inch, 2-inch thick scope of work specifications and details, as much as I would wish that they would sit down and read those, it just doesn't happen. We even sit there and try and narrate them at pre-bids prior to submitting proposals, all the way down to requiring as deep a submittals as we can to get those holes out of it and understand exactly where they're at. So with the cooperative process, you also get some benefit and you're getting a third-party review by the fact that whichever organization or procurement method you go through, they have to certify that contract. Once that contract gets signed by the individual, it has to go to, say, TIPS. They have to certify that to make sure that it truly meets favored nation pricing, meaning the best possible price that they would give for that unit. And they have to break that down because ultimately they have to answer to the legislature of Texas. And they also have to keep their books open for quarterly review and audit. So they not only have to demonstrate favored nation on the front end, but they also have to demonstrate favored nation on the back end by being audited on a quarterly basis. So there is some value in getting that. And there's also some value in the fact that you're able to leverage if you're a one building project and you're dealing with a vendor that's doing 100 projects a year. Well, now you're getting the leverage of those 100 projects because one slip up and he loses all of that other work. And so you do have more leverage than like you were talking about a one-time and out kind of deal.
And that's because that cooperative manages that such that if they refuse to do your job, they may no longer be eligible to do other work.
Correct.
Is that correct?
One slip up or non-compliance of contract, you're out.
All right, well, let's talk about JOC, job order contracting. Grady, I think you're our guy on that.
I think so. Again, similar to the purchasing cooperatives, and many of them are available through purchasing cooperative. Job order contract allows you some selection. It's available for many different services and products, not just the roofing. My own experience, we had our own job order contract when I was with the district for fencing and for sidewalks. Again, setting up your specifications is important, and then making sure that you have unit prices. So bringing your designer in to help draw up those job order contract bid processes and documents is important. There are job order contracts available through purchasing cooperatives, or you can do your own. Especially when you get into the maintenance and repair side of roofing, it may be very advantageous. It's difficult to find contractors that will come out and give you estimates. Most of the time, most districts or public entities, you're going to have to get 3 comparison prices until it goes over a certain dollar value. And if you're having to do that time after time after time, oftentimes a job order contract is a much more efficient way to do that if you've got a repetitive process or material that you're dealing with. So it's not necessarily applicable to all projects. Certainly, if there's a large design aspect, another delivery method may be a more efficient and more cost-effective process to use.
Might also throw, we got a lot of good experience in the jock side of this when we were assisting the U.S. Navy and NAVFAC during Katrina and Ivan. Jocks can be, along with some of your cooperatives, great ways to support emergency and catastrophic response type events. They are tremendous tools where you can pre-negotiate rates, pre-negotiate steps of performance and mobilization without having to be out any money on the front end, but also being able to pull that trigger in 30 minutes, 60 minutes, an hour. You can set your own time responses on this, as well as your burn rates you can set. You can also set your manpower rates. So it's a great way to be prepared should you had a catastrophic event, to where you really can get first in line and get your stuff taken care of, so you can then take care of your cities, your towns, your kids, which is what this is all about, and do it pretty economically.
And the great thing is it can be a multi-year agreement. It's not just an every year annual process to go and put it back out for bid or for proposal for that JOC. It can be a multi-year agreement, again, involving your council to make sure all the terms are right and the terminology and the contracts are up to date. But certainly as an emergency response tool, it's very valuable to have that in place. Then it's a matter of a phone call.
Yeah, NAVAC runs a reoccurring every 5 years with an optional one-time renewal, so it can run as much as 10 years on the Fed side. Now, I don't know if there's limitations from the state side or not, but it's been a really good program for them.
Scott and Grady, one of the things that I kind of keep hearing y'all say is so much of this is dependent on who your contractor is. And so the different methods, hopefully, are you able to somewhat build in the controls you need to protect you with that contractor in these methods?
Any contract, you need to make sure that it is protecting the owner. I've seen many instances where the contract protects the contractor, it protects the designer, not as much so the owner. The owner's the one forking out all the money, so that certainly needs to be protected. No matter the delivery method, a strong review and strong negotiation of the contract terms is important. So making sure that's a thorough process, as thorough as the design process coming up with the specifications and the system that you're selecting. Not so much from the public side that you can say, you know, here's our contractor and we're going to go out CSP from now on, but they're always going to get it. I think there's got to be legitimacy there and transparency that the selection is legitimate. So, but the issue of finding good contractors is important, especially I serve South Texas, basically, well, not all South, Texarkana to Del Rio, so I do go north a little bit. But finding in East Texas, and we've also found it in West Texas, as the districts get a little more remote, getting that responsiveness from contractors and designers, it can be difficult. So once you find that contractor, that designer that is responsive and does a good job, certainly at least maintain a relationship so you can, you know, it's disheartening when you put out a proposal and you get no responses. So doing all you can as an owner to cultivate those relationships and expand as much as you can.
I mean, that's another way where your cooperatives can sometimes kick in. I know the cooperatives sometimes can get some resources where typically you can't. You know, there's also an issue when it comes to contractors and the fact that we're on a double-edged sword in Texas. I hope it changes someday, but we're in a right-to-work state in a non-licensed state. That is a bad prescription. What happens is that is a environment that breeds marketing firms that go out and collect contracts and then go out the back door and auction them off to labor pools. Until we get some licensing back into this market in Texas through some of our government folks, it makes it very difficult because you have that right to work, which gives you some ways and methods that contractors can exclude workman's comp and some other insurance coverages. It creates a great deal of variability in the type of crews that you can get. That's why we also spend a lot of time writing language into these scopes and specs that really focus not only on manufacturers and performance criteria, but contractors and performance criteria. We try and do the same things with contractors in defining who is eligible to work as much as we do with the type of system and assembly we're working with. We also try and put conditions in place to where we can, to the best of our ability, always keep the owner in the driver's seat. Some of that is if you want to work with government entities, you should be willing to bill on a monthly basis. We shouldn't be dealing with a bunch of processing of invoices for stored material and that kind of stuff, because once you start prepaying things, that's where things get reversed again, and all of a sudden, you guys are on the back seat, not the front seat. So we kind of put in procedures that say, hey, you're not going to get paid between the 20th and the 25th, but we're also going to spend a lot of time with the owner, making sure the owner understands why it is so important that they don't miss that, getting that check out to them by the 5th. We're going to move heaven and earth to get that thing processed so that we're as consistent on our end as what we're demanding of you on your end, but it has to be audited, it has to be documented that it's complete 100%, or you don't get to invoice it.
And Jim, I have a question for you, but I'd like to let you go ahead and jump in and if you want.
Okay, I as far as licensing, I agree with you 100%. I think that so I have a general contractor's license in 11 different states, from Florida through Texas and north. And every one of those states, you know, we have to go through a qualifying exam. We have to go through a financial review every year. We have to submit, in some states, audited financials. And in my mind, what that does is that levels the playing field.
Well, sure, you're having to compete against people that have far less invested in this and can walk away from it tomorrow and change a letter and back out on the street the next day.
Yeah, exactly. So the roofing industry, especially in Texas, has become very, I'll use the word sophisticated. I mean, there's a lot of roofing contractors that have learned how to work the system. They go door to door. They offer you free hail inspections. They offer you, consulting services. We need to get away from that. That in this morning, that slide showing the increase in hail claims, sure, we have, our weather patterns have changed. Sure, we have more development, but also I've been doing this for 33 years, and I have watched the roofing industry go from us, most of our work comes from insurance company referrals, from doing, maybe 15% of our volume to, being almost 50% of our volume now. And a lot of that, you've got to be careful in Texas. It really is there's a lot of pitfalls all along.
I mean, I'll give you an example. We've got less credible contractors running around right now that we've seen that are walking around with $1 million, $2 million umbrellas of certificate of insurance with a $1,999,999 deductible. There are companies out there that will write those policies for a flat rate. Well, they're not paying a percentage of every dollar that comes through their till. It's a facade. And unfortunately, those are the kinds of things that we start to see in markets that are not a licensed market. I'm licensed to be a contractor in California, New Mexico, and Arkansas. I don't do it, but I had to get those in effort to testify in some cases out there. But it's amazing what happens when you have both right to work state, where you can declare, if you've got a 7-man crew, I can declare all 7 men are private entities among themselves, which gives them exclusions from workman's comp. Sign a waiver, leave the date off the waiver, give it to the marketing firm that sold the contract, and nobody's paying any workman's comp, and everybody is completely under the wire and umbrella legally.
You have to be careful when you're checking a contractor's certificate of insurance, because it will only apply to employees of that company. So it would apply to, management, it would apply to, employed superintendents and staff, but the people that are in the field working are generally not covered by workers.
And in most cases, you can get that information.
It's easy. All you got to do is ask.
Right. Now, kind of moving over toward the specs and that sort of thing, because all we've talked about today is trying to get value for everyone. And whatever price we pay, we'd like to get value for that. Now, Jim, if you're going to bid something, you're a victim, if you will, or you're tied to whatever those specs are as you price it, correct?
Yes.
And if we say we want to make sure it's tight, and we should to protect the owner, but if we make it so onerous and put a lot of additional requirements that don't add value, maybe they're heavy punitive things in there, when you bid that, do you have to account for all that? Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do some of the things, and maybe either Grady or Scott talk about things where you bid for value, but you don't want to bid and you want to protect the owner, but at the same time don't want to cause a guy like Jim that I've got to write a big number in there because I have to account for that.
Well, you have to be very careful. You can make these things so laborious, so challenging, with so many liabilities being dumped on the contractor of record. And if anyone thinks that they're not going to add a 2%, a 3%, a 5% to cover their risk, it's crazy to think they wouldn't. That's why it's so important. And I can tell you right now, I know several contractors that actually will put together a price on a project much cheaper if they know a consultant, a manufacturer, other people are all involved working together to get the best possible system for that owner. And then you get in some other projects where you walk in and they hand you a book let's say it's 6 inches thick on a 200 square roof, and everybody just goes, whoa. And you start to read this stuff, and contractor be liable for this, and liable for that, and liable for this, no force majeure. Contractor must lock in, not to exceed. There's language in there, or we had one guy that would go in and rewrite the OSHA standard for safety. If you don't think that was jacking the number up on that contract, when all he would have had to do is say, this project needs to comply with all OSHA guidelines, period. Instead, you keep adding these layers and layers of thresholds that you're making these contractors go through. Just understand, there is a cost, some cost that goes into that the more you stackpile liability on the contractor.
Right.
Like
Agree.
damaging, hitting them with a bill if they exceed 60 days on their construction, and we're going to ignore the fact that we had 30 days of rain continuous, or we had 16 days of 25-mile-an-hour winds. You're either done on 90 days, or we're going to deduct $500 a day. Well, they're going to have to build that in their cost.
You know, as I've worked with districts on the construction side, on the broader scope, I talked to the superintendents and the boards about this needs to be a fair project. For it to be a successful project, it's got to be fair. There are things that the contractor absolutely has to take care of, contractually held to that. There are things that the designer is responsible for, contractually held to that. And then there are things that the owner, the district, the city, the municipality, they're responsible for. And so coming up with a fair approach that is about delivering the best project possible is what I think what contractors are looking for. It's what designers are looking for. It's what owners should look for. You talk about the premium that you have to pay. I know of examples where if there's a certain designer, contractor's like, well, I'm going to add 10% because I've had to work with them before, or a certain owner, well, I'm going to add 15 or 20% because I've had to work with them before. So having a good, solid, fair approach to it, not to excuse anybody from any responsibilities, but everybody takes care of their responsibility, is part of this recipe for success on a project.
I ran across one the other day that we weren't involved in, but I had a friend send it to me, and it said you must submit a bid proposal on our form. The bid must be good for no less than 6 months, and the contractor must start work with materials no less than 72 hours after award.
Wow.
Okay, you just shrunk the window down so small. If you don't think somebody's going to factor in, or contractor must mobilize in 72 hours, demob after 1 week, and remob 6 other times. Well, guess what? That's going to have a cost.
Exactly. You're going to pay for each mobilization. You're going to pay for anticipated material price increases.
Sure, and that's why it's so much easier to say, hey, let's find an appropriate window in which the contractor can reasonably get in, do his work safely, and schedule it accordingly instead of putting a bunch of additional hops that you got to make to try and jump through a window to get this thing successfully done.
Exactly.